The air splits apart with the shriek of incoming fire, each crack a death sentence written in supersonic lead. Muzzle flashes bloom like hellish flowers in the oppressive dark of the ravine, pinning them down behind crumbling mud brick walls. Corporal Cora breathes shallowly, dust and cordite filling her lungs, her cheek pressed against the cold stock of her rifle. Beside her, a shadow detaches from the deeper blackness, a low growl vibrating through the ground. Fong, her Belgian Malinois, is a coiled spring of lethal intent, his eyes fixed on the source of the attack. The patrol is shattered, there comes a storm of static and screams. 10 meters to her left, the enemy commander steps into the flickering light of a burning vehicle, shouting orders, directing the slaughter. He's exposed. A perfect shot. But she's just a K9 handler, a glorified dog walker in the eyes of the command. Taking that shot means breaking every rule, revealing a skill no one knows she has. Will she pull the trigger and save them all, or will she die in the mud, following orders to the letter? Where are you watching this story unfold from? Are you in India, the USA, the UK, or maybe somewhere like Goa? Drop your location in the comments below. Let us know where the spirit of resilience is burning bright tonight. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to see a hero rise, and comment with what the word service means to you. The story of Corporal Cora begins now, in the dirt and the blood. Just hours earlier, the air in the briefing tent was thick with a different kind of hostility. It was stale with body odor and the metallic tang of condescension. Major Cade stood before the holographic map, his pointer stabbing at objective markers like he was killing insects. His eyes, small and hard, swept over the assembled soldiers of Havoc Company before landing, as they always did, on Cora. She stood at the back, Fong sitting placidly at her heel, his head cocked. Perimeter sweeps will be conducted by standard patrols, Cade announced, his voice oozing disdain. And Corporal Cora will take her asset, and check the southern irrigation ditches. A glorified pest control job. Keep him from sniffing the wrong places. A few sycophantic snickers rippled through the ranks. Cora's jaw tightened, but her face remained a mask of professional indifference. She had learned long ago that reacting only fed the beast. Major, she said, her voice steady and low, Fong is trained to detect accelerants and hidden ordnance. My patrol sector borders the primary approach vector. He could be more useful on point with Alpha Squad, Cade smirked, a cruel twist of his lips. He walked towards her, circling her as if she were a piece of faulty equipment. Corporal, your asset is a dog. A well-trained animal, I'll grant you, but an animal nonetheless. This is a war, not a country fair. Real soldiers, he gestured to the burly infantryman, rely on steel, skill, and guts. Not a wet nose, he leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that carried through the silent tent. Your dog can't save you when the bullets start flying. Remember that. He then turned to the rest of the company. Dismissed, the soldiers filed out, some casting her looks of pity, others of amusement. Sergeant Rex, a man whose face was a roadmap of past campaigns, paused beside her. Don't let him get to you, Corporal. The major's got a stick so far up his own rear echelon, he tastes pine. Cora gave a slight nod, her hand resting on Fong's powerful neck. The dog whined softly, sensing her distress. She didn't need Rex's pity. She just needed to do her job. The irrigation ditches were a maze of stagnant water and razor-sharp reeds, a forgotten corner of the forward operating base. It was punishment, a deliberate act of marginalization, and they both knew it. As dusk bled across the sky in hues of orange and purple, Fong suddenly went rigid. A low, guttural growl rumbled in his chest, a sound Cora knew meant something was profoundly wrong. It wasn't the sharp bark of an explosive trace or the whine of a tripwire. This was the sound of imminent, predatory violence. Easy, boy, she murmured, her hand sliding from her rifle's safety to her sidearm. Show me. And now, that same growl was the only thing keeping the terror at bay as bullets chewed the wall above their heads. The ambush had been perfectly executed. They were caught in a kill box. The enemy commander was still visible, a silhouette of arrogance against the flames. She wasn't a sniper, Cade's mocking voice echoed in her head. She was just the dog girl. But her father, a man who had taught her to shoot before she could properly read, had taught her that a weapon was an extension of will. Hers was forged in grief and iron discipline. He had been a hunter. He had made her a hunter. She wouldn't take the shot. Not like a sniper would. She would do it her way. Fong, she whispered, her command a puff of air. Hush, the growling stopped instantly. The dog looked at her, his intelligence a burning fire in the dark. She gave him a series of silent hand signals, a language of balletic precision they had perfected over 1,000 hours of training. Circle wide. Distract. On my signal. Fong dipped his head once, a solemn agreement, and melted into the shadows. Cora counted her breaths. 1. 2. The commander was shouting again, emboldened by the lack of return fire from her position. 3. A sudden, ferocious barking erupted from the far right flank, 100 meters from where she was hiding. It was followed by the panicked shouts of enemy fighters. Fong was a ghost, a blur of fur and fury, drawing their attention, pulling their fire. The commander turned, his focus shifting for a fatal second. That was her signal. Cora rose from her cover, not with the slow precision of a marksman, but with the fluid grace of an apex predator. She didn't aim for his head. She aimed for the radio on his chest. 3 rounds, fired in a controlled burst. Thump thump thump. The radio exploded in a shower of sparks and plastic. The commander staggered back, clutching his chest, his command and control severed. Chaos rippled through the enemy ranks. Their coordination vanished. In the command tent, a kilometer away, Colonel Sterling watched the drone feed, his face grim. He had seen the patrol get hit, had watched the command icon for Alpha Team go dark. He was about to write them off as a total loss when a single, unexpected icon flickered back to life, K9-1. Cora. He saw the impossible. A lone operator, using their K9 unit as a tactical diversion, suppressing the enemy command element with precise, disabling fire. She wasn't killing, she was dismantling. He watched as she used the confusion to guide the surviving members of the patrol, 2 wounded men, back towards a defensible position, all while Fong harried the enemy's flank, a phantom menace they couldn't pin down. Get me a channel to K9-1, Sterling barked, his voice cutting through the panicked chatter of the TOC. Now the comms crackled. K9-1, this is Citadel. Report, Cora's voice came back, strained but clear, punctuated by the snap of nearby gunfire. Citadel, K9-1. Ambush at grid 4-7-9er. Hostile command element neutralized. AM withdrawing with 2 wounded. Need QRF and medevac. How copy? Sterling leaned back, a slow, appreciative smile touching his lips for the first time in weeks. Major Cade stood beside him, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. She broke protocol, sir. She engaged without authorization. She saved lives, Major, Sterling retorted, his eyes still glued to the screen. Something your real soldiers failed to do, he turned his gaze to Cade, his eyes like chips of ice. When she gets back, I want her in my office. She's wasted on you. The debrief was a sterile, cold affair. Cora stood at attention before Colonel Sterling's desk, Fong sitting perfectly by her side. Major Cade loomed in the corner, radiating impotent rage. Corporal, Sterling began, his voice a low rumble. What you did out there was unorthodox. It was also brilliant. He steepled his fingers, studying her. She wasn't what he expected. Small, wary, with eyes that held a deep, old sorrow but also an unbreakable core of steel. The reports say you were a logistics clerk before you applied for the K-9 program. Your file says you barely qualified on the rifle range. I meet the standard, sir, Cora said quietly. You don't just meet the standard and make a shot like that under that kind of pressure, Sterling countered. You dismantled an enemy command structure in the middle of a firefight with a standard-issue rifle. Who trained you? My father, sir. The words were clipped, a door shutting on a painful memory. Sterling didn't push. He saw the ghosts in her eyes. He had his own. Major Cade believes you are a liability, he continued, glancing at the fuming officer. I believe you are an untapped resource. I'm reassigning you. Effective immediately, you and Fong are attached to my Pathfinder unit. You'll be our advanced scout, our tracker. Cade stepped forward. Sir, with all due respect, this is a mistake. She's a woman. She's emotionally compromised by that animal. The Pathfinders are an elite unit. And they just lost their best tracker last week, Sterling shot back, his voice dangerously quiet. She proved her worth tonight. Your objection is noted, Major. And overruled. Now get out of my office. Cade's face went white, then a mottled red. He shot Cora a look of pure venom before turning on his heel and storming out. Sterling turned back to Cora. This won't be easy. The men won't accept you. Cade will be looking for any excuse to see you fail. You'll be tested. I'm ready, sir, Cora said, her hand instinctively finding Fong's head. The dog looked up at her, his devotion absolute. We're ready. The first test came less than a week later. An Allied operative, carrying sensitive intel, had been captured behind enemy lines. His transponder had emitted one last ping before going dark in the treacherous Blackwood Forest, a place so dense and dangerous it was known as the Green Hell. It was a mission for the Pathfinders. Sterling laid out the mission parameters. Cora, you and Fong will lead. Find his trail. Sergeant Rex, he nodded to the grizzled veteran, who looked less than thrilled, you and your fire team will provide security. Major Cade's unit will be on standby for exfil. Cade, present via video link, gave a tight, insincere smile. We'll be ready to clean up any mess, Colonel. The jungle was a living, breathing entity that wanted to swallow them whole. Rain fell in relentless sheets, turning the ground to a slick, sucking mud. The humidity was a physical weight, pressing down, stealing breath. For 2 days, they pushed through the suffocating green. The men were on edge, their trust in Cora and her pet non-existent. Rex was professional but distant, his skepticism a palpable force. Anything, Corporal? He'd ask every hour, his tone dripping with doubt. He's getting a scent, Cora would reply, her focus entirely on Fong, who worked tirelessly, his nose to the ground, casting back and forth, deciphering the invisible story left on the forest floor. On the third day, Fong found it. A single, mud-caked boot print, partially washed away by the rain. Then, a dropped ration wrapper. He was on the trail. Cora's confidence surged. They were close. She relayed their progress to Sterling, unaware that Cade was monitoring the same channel, a predator waiting for his moment. As they moved into a narrow canyon, the jungle suddenly went silent. The incessant buzz of insects died. The chirping of birds ceased. It was a silence that screamed danger. Fong stopped dead, a low growl starting in his chest. Hold, Cora commanded, her voice sharp. Ambush. Rex's team immediately took cover, their skepticism evaporating in a wave of adrenaline. Where? Rex hissed. I don't see anything. Fong does, she replied. They're in the rocks above. At least a dozen. Before she could formulate a plan, the world exploded. RPGs slammed into the canyon walls, showering them with rock and debris. Heavy machine gun fire opened up from concealed positions, pinning them down. It was a perfectly laid trap. They had walked right into it. Citadel, this is Pathfinder 1. We are under heavy contact. We are pinned down. Rex yelled into his radio. The response was chillingly calm. It was Cade. Pathfinder 1, be advised, exfil is compromised. We are encountering heavy resistance moving to your position. Hold tight, it was a lie. Cora knew it in her gut. Cade wasn't coming. He had set this up. He had leaked their route. This was his chance to get rid of the woman and her dog who had embarrassed him. The firefight was brutal and one-sided. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and trapped. One of Rex's men went down, a cry of pain cut short. Ammunition was running low. Despair began to set in. And then, through the din of battle, came the sound of approaching vehicles. Hope surged through the pinned-down soldiers. It was Cade. He had come through after all. But as the truck screeched to a halt on the canyon rim, the soldiers who disembarked were not there to help. They took up positions overlooking the firefight, effectively cutting off any chance of escape. Major Cade appeared on the ridgeline, a silhouette against the gray sky. He raised a megaphone. Surrender your weapons. You are surrounded. Rex stared in disbelief. What the hell is he doing? Who is he talking to? But Cora knew. He was talking to the enemy. He was orchestrating the whole thing. A figure emerged from the enemy line, waving a white flag, and walked to meet Cade. They spoke for a moment, then Cade pointed down at Cora's position. The trap wasn't just for them to die, it was for them to be captured. He needed her to fail spectacularly. The enemy fighters began to advance, their confidence absolute. Rex and his remaining men fought with the fury of the betrayed, but it was hopeless. A stray round ricocheted, striking Cora's leg. She cried out, falling to the ground, her rifle skittering away. The enemy swarmed her position. It was over. Cade made his way down into the canyon, his face a mask of triumphant glee. He strode over to where Cora lay, bleeding, Fong standing over her, growling, his teeth bared. Well, Corporal, Cade sneered, kicking her rifle away. Looks like I was right, he gestured to the carnage. A real soldier would have seen this coming. But you were too busy playing with your pet, he looked at the snarling dog. Stand down, you stupid mutt. Fong didn't move, his protective instincts overriding all training. Cade laughed. You see? It's just an animal. It can't understand. He took a step closer, reaching down for Cora. It's over. You're a failure, he looked Fong directly in the eyes, his voice dripping with venom. Your dog can't save you. It was the last full sentence he would speak clearly for a long time. As his hand touched Cora's shoulder, Fong exploded. It wasn't a bark or a warning. It was a silent, terrifying launch of pure, concentrated fury. He hit Cade in the chest, knocking the larger man off his feet. Before Cade could even process what had happened, Fong's jaws clamped down on his outstretched arm. The sound was sickening, a wet crunch of bone and tearing flesh. Cade screamed, a high, piercing shriek of agony and terror. The dog shook his head violently, his powerful neck muscles doing exactly what they were bred to do. The enemy fighters, stunned by the sudden, savage turn of events, hesitated for a fraction of a second. It was all Cora needed. Ignoring the searing pain in her leg, she drew her sidearm. The first shot took out the fighter closest to her. The second and third followed in quick succession. Rex, seeing his chance, rallied his last man. Attack, he roared, unleashing a volley of fire into the shocked enemy ranks. The betrayal, the ambush, the sheer audacity of Cade's treason had flipped a switch. They were no longer soldiers fighting an enemy, they were cornered animals fighting for survival. The brief, brutal chaos was their cover. Cora grabbed her radio. Colonel Sterling, this is K9-1. Cade is a traitor. He set us up. I repeat, Major Cade is a traitor. She didn't know if the signal was getting through, but she had to try. Fong released the screaming, bleeding Major, whose arm was now a mangled ruin. The dog immediately returned to Korra's side, a bloody shield between her and the world. The tide had turned. The enemy, their deal with Cade literally torn apart, fell into disarray. They had expected a simple capture, not a desperate, bloody fight to the death. Rex and his man fought like demons, punching a hole in the enemy line. "Corporal, now!" Rex yelled, providing covering fire. Korra limped towards him, leaning on Fong for support. They fought their way back to the captured operative, who had been left under light guard, and freed him. As they scrambled out of the canyon, the thunderous sound of helicopter rotors filled the air. 2 gunships, Sterling's personal wolf pack, swept in low, their miniguns spewing fire and death onto the traitorous soldiers and their erstwhile allies. Colonel Sterling had heard her call. He had seen enough on his own drone feed to know something was wrong, and Korra's desperate transmission was the final confirmation. He had brought the fury of the heavens with him. Back at the FOB, the aftermath was swift and brutal. Major Cade, sedated and under heavy guard in the medical bay, was formally arrested for treason. The soldiers who had followed his orders were taken into custody. Sergeant Rex, his face grim, gave his official statement, corroborating every detail of Korra's story. He stood before Sterling, his uniform torn and blood-stained. "Sir," Rex said, his voice thick with emotion. "That woman. That corporal. She's the finest soldier I've ever served with. And her dog. He's one of us." Sterling found Korra in the veterinary clinic. She was stitching a cut on Fong's flank, her own leg bandaged, her movements slow and deliberate. The dog sat patiently, licking her hand from time to time. "The doctors wanted to admit you," Sterling said softly. "I told them I needed to see my dog first," she replied, not looking up. Her voice was quiet, fragile. "You did well, Corporal. More than well. You saved everyone." "Not everyone," she whispered, a tear tracing a path through the grime on her cheek. Sterling sat on a crate beside her. "War is a dirty business, Korra. Betrayal is the deepest cut. What Cade did. It taints all of us. But what you did. You reminded us what honor looks like." He paused. "I'm recommending you for a field commission to lieutenant. And I'm creating a new unit. A Special Operations K-9 division. I want you to lead it." Korra finally looked up, her eyes wide with shock. "Me? Sir, I'm just a handler." "No," Sterling said firmly. "You're a leader. You've proven it. The men, Rex and the others, they're already asking to serve under you. They don't see a woman or a handler. They see a warrior." He stood up to leave. "The offer stands. Get some rest, Lieutenant." Korra sat there for a long time, Fong's warm head in her lap. A lieutenant. A commander. It was more than she had ever imagined. The ghosts of her past, the faces of her lost family, swirled in her memory. She had joined the military to find a purpose, to channel her grief into something that mattered. Cade's taunts echoed in her mind. "Your dog can't save you." He was wrong. Fong had saved her. They had saved each other. And now, they had a new mission. 3 months later, Lieutenant Korra stood before her new unit. The Havoc Hounds. 6 elite soldiers, including a newly promoted Sergeant Major Rex, and their 6 K-9 partners. They were the military's new scalpel, a unit designed for tracking, reconnaissance, and direct action. Their first official mission was a ghost from Korra's own past. Intel had located the headquarters of the Black Scorpions, the very terrorist cell responsible for the bombing that had killed her parents years ago. It was a deeply personal mission, and Sterling had given her the choice to sit it out. She had refused. This was not about revenge. It was about closing a circle. It was about ensuring no other little girl lost her family the way she had. The raid was a symphony of controlled violence. They moved through the desert night like wraiths. Fong and the other dogs led the way, their silent senses detecting sentries and booby traps long before human eyes could. Cora was no longer just a handler, she was a battlefield conductor. Her commands were crisp, her tactical decisions flawless. She moved with a confidence that inspired absolute loyalty in her team. They cornered the cell's leader in a subterranean bunker. He was the man who had given the order, the architect of her pain. He looked at her, a young woman with an old soul, and her fearsome dog at her side, and he sneered. "You think this changes anything? You think killing me brings them back?" "No," Cora said, her voice devoid of hatred, filled only with a cold, hard finality. "This isn't for them. This is for all the ones you'll never get to hurt." She gave the signal, and her team moved in. As the sun rose over the desert, casting long shadows from the captured compound, Cora stood watching the horizon. Rex came and stood beside her. "It's over, Lieutenant." "No," she said, a faint smile on her lips as she knelt and wrapped her arms around Fong's neck. "It's just the beginning." She had faced the worst of humanity, the enemy without and the enemy within. She had been broken, betrayed, and underestimated. But through it all, she had risen, forged in the crucible of combat, her loyalty and courage unshakable. She was a leader. A warrior. A survivor. And at her side was the partner who had proven, once and for all, that the bond between a soldier and her K9 was a weapon more powerful than any steel, and a shield more resilient than any armor. Her dog had saved her, and together, they would save many more.